Because we do not know when we will die, we get to think of life as an inexhaustible well. And yet everything happens only a certain number of times, and a very small number, really. How many more times will you remember a certain afternoon of your childhood, an afternoon that is so deeply a part of your being that you can't even conceive of your life without it? Perhaps 4 or 5 times more, perhaps not even that. How many more times will you watch the full moon rise? Perhaps 20, and yet it all seems limitless.
Happy heresies, my beloved true seekers. We have just entered the virtual Alexandria, that state of mind where Eastern attitude meets Western mysticism, where all roads converge, but only the filtering of the numinous, emancipating truth remains. This is where we, gods in the becoming, meet once and a forever and slowly bring out the pearl of ultimate wisdom from the muck that is our existence in the world of material forms.
Everybody's hell is different. It's not all fire and pain. The real hell is your life gone wrong.
Like the Nag Hammadi Library's Sophia of Jesus Christ says, whoever is worthy of Gnosis will receive it, and with that Gnosis he will become an immortal in the midst of mortal men. Or like the treatise on resurrection says, also in the Nag Hammadi Library, everything is prone to change, and the world is an illusion.
Mom! Dad! It's evil! Don't touch it!
We didn't ask to be born. We never wanted to suffer. We never expected to be trained like carpenter ants bringing back crumbs every day to Agnoia, or ignorance, the wife of the demiurge. But we now understand that we can escape this destiny, this body that is the tomb, as Plato called it, and ascend to heights even angels imagined in their more honest moments. Yes, my beloved true seekers, we are the Gnostics, the veterans of 1,000 psychic wars and the secret Christians who have thrived in the Black Iron Prison for almost 2,000 years.
It's the weirdest thing. I feel like I've been in a coma for about 20 years, and I'm just now waking up.
We reject St. Paul's God of this world. We reject the God of kiddie porn, the God of Burma genocide and Chinese earthquakes, the God of cancer, the God of viruses, and the God that rules the ego fastened to each and every sentient being and spirit of the universe. We reject him in the name of Hypatia of Alexandria, Mary Magdalene, Helen of Troy, the Shekinah of Yahweh, and all the other avatars of our Mother Sophia who watches over us beyond the static heavens.
My God, it's full of stars.
We reject him in the name of Christ the Logos, Orpheus, Asclepius, Hermes Trismegistos, Mani the Prophet, Valentinus, and all the apostles of light that transmit those sound waves that awaken our petition for Gnosis, the salvific knowledge of the heart that makes us but tourists and not trinket salesmen of the cosmos. And we learn this slowly on Aeon Byte, broadcast from thegodabovegod.com every Saturday and Sunday, every week and every eternal now, although you're listening to this on this approximately Saturday, May 17. And with each show, a chip of what is not you, what is the rusty chains of fate, is chipped away while you prepare yourself to write your own gospel and live your own myth like our ancient and spiritual forefathers did. So in between taking mental notes or soaking up spongefuls of a higher reality, light up some tobacco substance if you will, and allow Agni or Loki to dance in your lungs. And make sure you've got fuel in your cup because coffee is for closers and fire is the devil's only friend. And we're going to burn an Aeon Byte. One way or another, we're gonna burn. In this program formerly and recently known as Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis.
You would need 3 promotions to get to be an asshole.
Some of you are already calling for the men in white now that you've seen the title of today's program. And certainly after my little tirade just now, because I've lost my mind and come to my senses a long time ago. The Gnostic Bond? The Gnostic Bond? Looks like the mortal incarnation of Abraxas, Miguel Connor, has finally reached too far into the occult cookie jar. He's fallen in that rabbit hole he always warns you about, and now descends into the netherworld of madness. He's finally past the point of confident awareness into stoic obsession, and now sees Gnosticism everywhere.
I'm afraid what you're describing is schizophrenia.
No, it's not schizophrenia. It's just a voice in my head.
Next you'll start seeing Gnostic things in Toy Story, World of Warcraft, American Idol, Hannah Montana, and even the best performances of Jenna Jameson. He's finally gone too far into his own little legend. The Gnostic James Bond? How about the Gnostic Austin Powers too?
Just a drink. A martini, shaken, not stirred.
Well, did you read the part in our promo that firmly states that it was Ian Fleming himself, the author of the Bond novels, who made this allegation? And that Fleming was a monstrous fan of Carl Jung and his ideas? That he was fixated with Paracelsus, who ironically decried the Gnostics but had more Gnostic tendencies than the Apostle Thomas? Or that symbolism is all over his work? Well, don't take it from me because I'm too busy seeing Gnosticism in the codes of the bars of my cell phone.
When a person is insane, as you clearly are, do you know that you're insane? Maybe you're just sitting around reading Guns and Ammo, masturbating in your own feces. Do you just stop and go, wow, it is amazing how fucking crazy I really am?
But please listen to our guest today, who is a man who uncovers more truths than Dolly Parton covers those ancient wrinkles on her face with cement plastic. He's made a career out of it, not just as a writer, but a documentary director and lecturer. And he's graced Aeon Byte several times with his truth-seeking, even when what he finds goes against his arcane background. He just says it like it is. And that is the controversial but wonderful Phil Gardiner, author of such books as Gnosis, Secret of Solomon's Temple Revealed, Gateways to the Otherworld, Secrets of the Serpent, and The Ark, the Shrouded Mary. Today, or in this eternal now, he discusses his new work, The Bond Code, and more than proves that Ian Fleming wasn't just the master of espionage and macho men, but the occult and esoteric as well.
Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned.
That's putting it mildly, 007.
For more information on Phil and his myriad projects and ruminations, please visit his website, gardinersworld.cam. That is GARDINERSWORLD.cam. It's a maze of cryptic discovery and third eye opening articles. And after the interview, or after you've hopefully purchased the Bond Code, you can make up your own mind as always, my beloved truth seekers. I am merely your psychopomp from the mundane shores of materiality to the potential shores of truth in all its degrees. A shore almost dried up by thousands of years of orthodoxy. Almost, but no more because of the information era and the virtual Alexandria.
Okay, I'll tell you everything, and you tell me everything, and maybe we can get through all the piss and shit and lies that kill other people.
And even if you don't buy into any of these theories, factoids, or proclamations of any program of Aeon Byte, formerly known as Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis, it really doesn't matter. You are probably missing the larger picture. The reality is that as truth seekers, we must question everything and anything that crosses our 5 or 6 senses. Almost nothing is as it seems in this world of shifting information sands. The victors not only get to write history, but more often than not get to dictate reality.
Perfect human world, where none suffered, where everyone would be happy.
Let me give you a few examples of what Aeon Byte, formerly known as Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis, as I say again, has revealed in 2 years of broadcasting. Before our venture, did you know Descartes and a slew of history changers were Rosicrucians? Did you know that Newton was a Freemason along with even more history changers? Did you know St. Paul was a Gnostic, a mystic, and an egalitarian? Did you know Eve was originally a goddess, superior than Adam, as well as a lower avatar of Sophia? Did you know that Sophia is still venerated in the Eastern churches? That the Gnostics were the first Christians? That the carnal Jesus was a 2nd century invention preparing for a dark theocracy? Did you know that the Kabbalah and modern science don't disagree? Did you know that Judaism was originally an Egyptian heresy? Did you know about the awakening puissance of mythology, the perils and opportunities of entheogens, the exercises in self-knowledge, the mind expansion of Apocrypha, and the various medieval truth-seekers? Did you know that all of this and about 24 other realities that were little known outside the halls of brave scholars and artists with daring visions that have graced this show?
I am sick and tired of everyone telling me I'm confused. I wasn't confused until other people started telling me I was.
And most important, did you know that the Gnostics, the mystics, and the occultists have always had a hand in the advancement of human civilization, right under the bovine nostrils of orthodoxy, fundamentalism, and literalism? That's why you have to look hard, because there are always forces inside of us, outside of us, and in the higher planes pulling veils over our eyes, because we are sheep to them who own light they crave. And they'll slaughter us every day, every lifetime, and every afterworld, just to bring us back to get ready for the next altar of Jehovah.
Our fathers were models for God. If our fathers bailed, what does that tell you about God?
Like the secret book of John says, "For from fear, forgetfulness, ignorance, and sin, the whole creation is made blind. They deceive and distract us, so none may come to know God." Run with those searching for the truth. Avoid those who have found it. Question everything, accept nothing, even Gnosticism. Like Stephen Heller once wrote, at the entrance of Gnosis, all isms, including Gnosticism, must be left at the doorway. And then you are naked to the truth, and that same truth shall clothe you in glory and clarity of the soul.
Don't act like you're not impressed.
You don't have to believe me. You just have to choose your own path, and we'll probably meet here and there, somewhere between the coasts of time and space. And give me a fast enough wing so that Yaldabaoth doesn't know that we're slowly climbing out of the pit of despair called human reality he crafted not too soon after he was given birth by Sophia.
Moses, this is the Lord thy God, commanding you to obey my law. Do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, I hear you. A deaf man could hear you.
What?
Nothing, forget it.
But enough of my drivel. Phil Gardiner talking about his new book, The Bond Code. Death spares none but the tiger.
First there was a dream. Now there is reality. Here, in the untainted cradle of the heavens, will be created a new super race, a race of perfect physical specimens. You have been selected as its progenitors. Like gods, your offspring will return to Earth and shape it in their image. You have all served in humble capacities in my terrestrial empire. Your seed, like yourselves, will pay deference to the ultimate dynasty which I alone have created. From their first day on Earth, they will be able to look up and know that there is law and order in the heavens.
Bond. James Bond.
Name's Bond. James Bond.
My name's Bond. James Bond.
Bond. James Bond.
Today we have the pleasure of having once again Phil Gardiner, one of my favorite truth seekers, and definitely a man who marches to his own beat and finds the truth more often than not, and comes up with some great revelations. And we will be discussing his new book, The Bond Code. How are you doing today, Phil?
I'm doing fine, thank you, Miguel.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, of all people, and that is shocking, is Ian Fleming. When exactly was the time when you realized that this man was an adept of the occult and the esoteric?
Well, I had an inkling after I'd just finished the Art, the Shroud and Mary book. You know, when you're writing things like that, your mind's kind of deeply involved in the world of the esoteric and all things alchemical and what have you. And I wanted a break, really, because I'd been at it for some years. So I sat down and said, you know, we were going to watch some TV for the first time in years. I'm going to sit down and watch the TV. And there was a revival of James Bond on TV. I think it was because of the Casino Royale. And the film that came on was Live and Let Die. I'll get it right. It was Live and Let Die with Roger Moore. And it struck me as rather occult. First time in, you know, I mean, I must have seen that film 5 or 6 times since childhood. Never really thought anything about it. But this time my mind was opened up. So I sat there and I thought, well, this is strange. We've got Baron Samedi, we've got snakes, we've got tarot cards. They're making a point about the Masonic twin pillars of Joachim and Boaz. So why is that? And that just kind of made me wonder whether this was the film industry that had done this to James Bond, or whether it was actually Ian Fleming himself. And so I decided to pick up a book on Ian Fleming, and now I have about 3 shelves full.
But most of the biographers missed this part, didn't they?
Not one of them that I've read has mentioned the occult, anything. I mean, one of them very fleetingly goes over his timing in Austria when he was younger, but even then they don't pick up on the fact that he was involved with Carl Jung and various other things. So nobody picked it up at all. And so after I'd read 2 biographies, 2 of the most famous ones, I decided to start reading the novels to try and get into the man as well. I'd already gleaned quite a lot from the biographies just by writing lists of names of associates down. Because what Ian Fleming was really famous for doing was keeping his people, his friends, in cells, quite apart from each other. And so I decided to write the names down, and some of those are very enlightening indeed. But no, none of them mentioned it, so I had to move into the novels, and that's where I started to see more and more that really didn't come through into the films.
And Phil, let me interrupt you for a second. You mentioned that he liked to keep his friend in different cells and separated. Why exactly does a person do that?
Well, I'd say there were several reasons. You could say because he had been basically second in charge of naval intelligence during the war, and that's part of the intelligence way of doing things, the secretive way of doing things, keeping people into cells. But you also find that Ian Fleming did this before the war, when he was much younger. So to me, there is more of a psychological reason for him doing it, and I think it was to hide the different parts of himself. He would show one part of himself to one group and another part to another group. It's very much like, for instance, if you're married, you act differently, or very often, with your wife than you do if you're down the pub with your mates. It's as if there's 2 sides of you, 2 reflections of the real you inside, or whatever. But Ian Fleming's was much deeper and much more complex than that simple little scenario there.
And can you tell us a little bit about his life, growing up, war, and all that?
Well, he's actually a fascinating character, and I think he's much more fascinating than James Bond, personally. Ian Fleming came from a family that, on his mother's side, was of royal descent. So he has blue blood inside him, which he later used in one of the names in the books. His father died when he was about 8 years old. He'd been a parliamentarian. a war hero, and came from a line of very, very wealthy bankers. The company that they owned was actually sold earlier this century for $7 billion, which
in those days
it's quite a lot of money. So he really didn't have to struggle for money. He certainly didn't have to struggle for social prestige, with amongst his peers. His elder brother Peter Fleming was an international best-selling travel writer who basically succeeded in everything he did, where Ian Fleming had to follow in the footsteps of both his father, his brother, and had to shine in his mother's eyes, who expected an awful lot of her little royal-blooded young child. And it seemed that he didn't succeed. He moved from one school to another and was eventually sent by his mother to Austria to a special school under the auspices of him needing to learn more languages, which was a cover story. He was actually going to see a couple of the new young fresh psychoanalysts that were coming around in the 1920s and 30s. And these were Adlerian psychoanalysts, and they knew Carl Jung and various other people, and so he was placed with these to basically sort out his mind, which seemed to be a very divided and dualistic mind, as most people are. So that's the early life, and what's really interesting about that is that he did understand what was going off. He understood more than most 19-year-olds would understand. He very cleverly played it as well. To the Adlerian psychoanalysts, he would show one side of himself, and then down in the town, skiing and womanizing, he would show a completely different side. And yet he went, interestingly, to a lecture given by Carl Jung on the alchemist, mystic, mathematician, healer, known as Paracelsus, which struck a serious chord with him.
You actually saw didn't he get a translation of a direct translation of Paracelsus that you've seen?
That's right. What it struck a chord so much with him that he actually asked Carl Jung at the tender age of 19. I mean, this is quite young, really. He actually asked Carl Jung if he could have permission to translate the lecture into English, and Carl Jung gave him permission. And the copy was later in life given to the mystic Dame Edith Sitwell during the very close friendship Ian Fleming had with her. They were even going to write a book about Paracelsus together. It was given to Dame Edith Sitwell, and then her goods were then given to Austin University in Texas, which is where I tracked it down to, and managed to get permission to both have a copy and use it for the first time. So there's no Bond biographer in all this time, no Ian Fleming biographer, should I say, in all this time has ever tracked it down or even really knew about it. So that was quite a first, and it's a very enlightening piece of paper because it points a few things out. Firstly, that Carl Jung was saying Paracelsus would have trouble in his life because he would have to deal with coming up to his father's standards, which he couldn't. And this is what struck a chord with Ian Fleming, and that Paracelsus would then utilize the ancient mystical arts, which both me and you know to be, ancient Gnosis, the dealing with the mind. The publishers for the Bond Code, really wanted to stick on the front cover Ian Fleming and the Occult, and I had to laugh while I was turning around saying, you even think about it.
Why
because,
is that?
It's just a stupid thing to really do, Ian Fleming and the Occult. I mean, I know what the Occult means, you know what the Occult means, but the rest of the world think it means something really dark and terrible. So Ian Fleming being into these things throughout his life did draw certain consternations from people. People did wonder what he was up to. So it's quite interesting.
And why did he decide to go into the military?
Well, there's not much choice really when the war's approaching. You know, I mean, even infamous Aleister Crowley had to settle down and do some propaganda work. He went in, his brother went in, all his friends and colleagues did, many friends from secret societies went in. He's not the sort of guy that you would throw onto the front line, because he wasn't really a war hero, even though he seriously wanted to be. His brother was. And so with friends and colleagues that he'd made over time and the family friends, he was moved into naval intelligence, where really what they say is that the mind of this man, the creative imagination that he had, was much better suited to something like naval intelligence. And when you see what he did when he was in naval intelligence, you understand why he was chosen and why he was moved in certain areas. I mean, for instance, he was responsible for setting up things such as the black operations, the occult operations, the ones that were to utilize astrology in order to confuse the Nazis, who were obviously deeply into astrology. So it was quite an interesting period for him, and it reveals quite a lot about what he was thinking, about what he already knew and the people he already knew. This is an entire world that Bond fans have never really ever known about in all this time.
Yeah, and didn't he almost hire Aleister Crowley one time, but never came through?
Well, it's a fascinating story, and there are several what's known as traditions. We can't get the paperwork out yet because he's not quite old enough, but the traditions from people that were in there and that know him, and the paperwork that we do have, which are letters between Aleister Crowley and Naval Intelligence, speak of a story. It's the story of Rudolf Hess, the famous kind of right-hand man of Adolf Hitler, who was really deeply into the occult, and so much so that British intelligence said that he just babbled most of the time. Rudolf Hess was led to believe by Ian Fleming's black propaganda bunch that the stars were in alignment, the planets were in alignment just right for a deal to be done between Great Britain and Germany, and that the British, certain people within the British royal family would await his arrival in Scotland. And it's fairly well known that there are elements within the royal family which were not necessarily totally against the Nazis. I think that's the easiest way of saying that. And so Rudolf Hess basically bit that off and swallowed it completely. Got in a plane and flew to Scotland. Had no idea how to land it, so he bailed and parachuted, where he was then picked up by the British and imprisoned. During that time, British intelligence couldn't get any sense out of the man at all. This is the story. And so they turned to, lo and behold, Ian Fleming, who they must have turned to Ian Fleming because they knew he understood these things. Strange that they didn't turn to anybody else. They turned to this man. Ian Fleming then suggested the use of Aleister Crowley, who he knew, not necessarily personally, but Aleister Crowley was, of course, infamous at that time, and many, many friends of Ian Fleming's were personal friends of Aleister Crowley anyway. So Aleister Crowley was asked, should it come to it, would you be able to deal with Rudolf Hess and translate? What actually happened is that British intelligence decided not to bother pushing Rudolf Hess. They didn't care, and this is the story, and it was totally hushed up that we had Rudolf Hess at all. And later, after the war, even Winston Churchill was asked why did they hush this whole period up, and he said it is not within the good of the British nation to tell anybody just yet why we did that. So nobody yet knows why Rudolf Hess was silenced and the whole thing hushed up. But it's a very strange story, and it may have more to do with the royal family than anything else, but that's a totally different sideline.
And it's sad because you write that it might have even been a peace treaty between England And Germany.
Well, that was the attempt. It was way too far gone by then. There's no way that our brothers across the Atlantic, the Americans, would have sucked that one up anyway. So, it was just a basic ploy to pull this right-hand man from underneath Adolf Hitler, and it did undermine him quite a lot. He did have to run around producing all kinds of propaganda and marketing to, for his domestic political scene, because it looked very, very bad for him.
So after the war, then he went into writing and began to show his occult influence into his novels, or he began to show. What is some of the evidence that Bond or was influenced, or I'm sorry, that Fleming was influenced by the Gnostics?
Well, of course, there's the fact that he was deeply interested in Carl Jung, and we both know that Carl Jung was a big proponent of Gnosticism, and of course the fact that Gnosticism comes through in alchemy, and that's really what alchemy is ultimately probably about. There are obviously the fools who did go around trying to turn lead into gold physically, but we both know that there's a psychological meaning to this in more ways than one. And so you would find in the work that Ian Fleming's done, his novels, that there would be influences in there from both Gnosticism and alchemy. And you do find alchemical references throughout the novels. A lot more I've discovered since writing the book, which is annoying me.
Wow.
But, I'll do another two, I think. That's fascinating. There's alchemical stuff in the books. There is Gnostic stuff, but the overriding story, the overriding theme, that's the most important one, and that's the one that runs through a great many of our wonderful and most successful stories that man has ever written. All the fables and folklores, from Robin Hood to King Arthur, and that is the fact that James Bond can never really win unless he has his feminine principle, and he must come into union with her, not just have her as a friend. He must have her in union. And this is the old Rosicrucian or alchemical chemical wedding. It's the union of the opposites that I know that you're fully aware of. So it has been said, and it could be said, and I said it myself, well, that's just James Bond, of course, is going to have a girl in his successful books, etc. And that could be the case, but there are certain references in the books which Fleming uses to point to the fact. He points to the fact that James Bond is fire and that the Bond girl is water. These are symbols that we both know are utilized by alchemy, water of wisdom and the fire. It's the symbols that have been used for an awful long time, and Ian Fleming is revealing the fact that he understands this. Other things in the books, such as, Blofeld, is a very clever device. It means blue field, and it's an indication of Ian Fleming's own royal blood. And how do we know that? Because he reaffirms it by giving Blofeld the same birthday as himself. Very clever. In Casino Royale, his main adversary is called Le Chiffre, which means cipher or code, and he's pointing to the fact that there is a code at play. Vesper Lind, the girl that dies, the Bond girl that dies at the end of Casino Royale, is tracked down by a man called Gettler, who is coming to get her because of her past, and Gettler means God. So, there are a great many of these little codes all the way through the book. Scaramanga, it means somebody to masquerade or hiding that which is within. Goldfinger, his name is Auric, Goldfinger. Auric, of course, is the word for gold. It's also an alchemical term for gold, and a goldfinger is something that the Jews were called for handling gold as well as alchemists. The fact that he cheats, that Goldfinger cheats, is really important in the novels, because that's something that the alchemists were accused of doing. So it's a very intricate thing, but also very, very simple once you open the lock, if you know what I mean. Once you understand that there is etymological codes, what the words mean, and then numerological codes, you start to pick them out, and it becomes quite interesting.
But even if you hadn't looked at those symbols, didn't Ian Fleming himself say that James Bond's religion was a Gnostic? I mean, he outright said it, didn't he?
He outright said it, and you know what really makes me laugh is that the biographers, when they write that Ian Fleming said that James Bond was Manichaean. I mean, you can't get any more plain than that.
No.
But the biographers say what he means is Ian Fleming was in a world divided by East and West, the communists and the capitalists. But he was inspired to write this way before then, and we've always been in a world that's divided because man's in it. So, you know, he's actually spelt it out for us. He's Manichaean, for crying out loud. Why do you think he says that? And then he even gives him a device, a very clever religious device for overcoming the murder that he has to commit, the assassinations, by making him a specific, giving him a specific religious background, which allows that. So it gives all the elements are there, quite in front of your face. But you know what's clever and what confuses the biographers, and I think it's genius, is that whenever Ian Fleming is asked about where did you get the name James Bond, where did you get the name for this, where did you do that, why did you call it Goldfinger, etc., and GoldenEye, and whenever he's asked these things, he has given so many different answers that he's just confused everybody. And I think that's just genius. That is the work of a man who has been in secret services. He knows how to obfuscate, and it's very clever, and it's confused everybody ever since.
And what do you think the name James Bond really means?
Well, I couldn't put my hand on my heart and be completely and utterly truthful and say that there is odd evidence James Bond means this or that. There are a few things that it could mean. Firstly, Ian Fleming suggests that he got it from a name from the author of a book on ornithology, on birds, because he wanted a boring name. This is one of his famous, throw-offs, throw you off the scent. And he's given other reasons for the James Bond too, which has confused people. Well, thought you said it was through this author, and then he changes his mind and calls it something else. So there has to be another reason for it, and I think that there are a few things. Firstly, bond, of course, is a covenant. It's a tie between two things, two people, two individuals or groups. It's the testament, if you like. It's a new covenant. And James was, for all intents and purposes, supposedly the brother of Jesus. So are we saying something else here with this name? I don't know. But one really interesting thing is that, of course, Ian Fleming plays a lot on the twin pillars of Joachim and Boaz, which of course have the initials J and B. And as we said at the start, it was watching Live and Let Die which inspired me to look into this, because James Bond is walking past an occult shop, stops and looks in the window, and there is a big tarot card with the twin pillars of Joachim and Boaz on, and they kind of halt on that scene for a second, as if, why are you halting on that scene? They'd previously made a point of the JB initials on his briefcase. And there are strangely Rosicrucian links into Ian Fleming, who of course had to sign their names off, with RC, always the initials. So JB, James Bond, Joachim and Boaz, who knows, there's no odd evidence, because Ian Fleming was incredibly clever at covering things up and hiding them.
And also, don't you mention that Bond in the novels went to a Calvinist school, and that's what makes him maybe amoral, because he believes in the destiny of people, so therefore he has no problem killing people? I mean, Bond is really a neutral character in all of this, right?
Yeah, Bond is the neutral character. I mean, you know, the adversaries here are Ian Fleming on the other side of the page, and of course his shadow self placed in there as the you know, the villains. James Bond is pushed and pulled by Ian Fleming, and one of you know, as I said earlier, he was also given this special religion, this Calvinist religion, to allow him to get away with the things that he is pointed by M, the master, to do. So, you know, it's revealing of Ian Fleming's understanding of religion. You know, he understood these things. He didn't just flit over them as most people do. He deeply understood what they meant. You don't write that James Bond was Manichaean and went to a Calvinist school and all the other things. You know, I mean, in Diamonds for Forever, we are pointed to the deep fact of we must peer into the heart of the stone, etc., etc. Ian Fleming went really deep into these things, and so there has to be a really good, strong reason for giving him a Calvinist upbringing, and that is so that he could overcome the psychological problems that Ian Fleming knew he would have when he was told to go and do the things that aren't right, the assassinations.
And why, is there any reason Fleming was also very interested in voodoo?
Well, he's certainly interested in voodoo because of the love of the place that he lived for 3 months of the year, and that's Jamaica, which is, you know, in that area, near Haiti and various other places. And a lot of the people that he knew there would tell him about voodoo. And a good friend of his was a writer of voodoo cultures, and so he picked up on that quite a lot too. And I think that within that he recognised certain elements which have come through in you know, down time to speak to us today, and there are still things within there that we should look at. You know, it's a fascinating culture, and I think that he was attracted to the snakes that are within the voodoo as well. There's a good reason to say that, and you know, we both know that serpents are very important to Gnosticism and alchemy, and you know, that's ultimately, when we go back in time, many thousands of years even, we find that serpents are there for a damn good reason, and it's just voodoo has come through a different thread to alchemy. It's the same original element, and he found that in voodoo. So I think that he was attracted to it because of that too. But what's really interesting is that, you know, was Ian Fleming interested in serpents so much that he would be looking at that in voodoo, etc.? Well, the fact is yes, and we can prove it. When Noel Coward, the famous playwright and actor, visited Gardiner in Jamaica, Ian Fleming's home, one of the remarks that he made was about the serpents on the walls. Not only did he not like the fact that the home was bare and barren, there was no phone or electricity or gas, you know, this was Ian Fleming's peaceful and perfect retreat. He didn't like the fact that there were snakes all over the walls. So there is that physical element that we have, reported by an individual friend, very long-term friend of Ian Fleming's, but there's also the fact that Ian Fleming put snakes all the way through his Bond novels. In Dr. No, the Dr. No himself utilises the dragon to scare people away, and he's even equated to a writhing serpent and a dragon. We also have the Ouroboros Snake and Bait Company and various other things throughout the whole books. You know, Hugo Drax, it's Hugo means mind, and Drax is dragons. It's mind of the dragon. This is the opposer to James Bond. This is his villain. It's the mind of the dragon. It's fascinating. So there are many of these throughout the books. Serpents, dragons are placed all the way throughout. It's typical dragon slaying.
And Phil, how did Queen Elizabeth's magician John Dee influence Fleming?
Well, this is fascinating. This isn't my discovery. This is the discovery of a spy and a friend of Ian Fleming's, a man called Richard Deacon. who knew Fleming during the war and afterwards, and pointed out that Ian Fleming was reading a biography of Dr. John Dee at the time that he was writing his first Bond novel, Casino Royale, which is very interesting. And Richard Deacon then points out that Dr. John Dee, who we both know, and I'm sure the listeners know, was a 16th century alchemist and mathematician, navigator, and spy of the realm, signed his letters off with three numbers that would appear to be 007, which may also be derived from eyeglasses, which with the handle and the two glasses making the 007. That's incredible if that's the case, and the evidence seems to suggest that. I've contacted a few John Dee scholars who have said that they think that that's probable, and so that's quite interesting. And what's also interesting is that there are letters back to Dee from Elizabeth signed M. So,
oh, wow.
Dr. John Dee is basically saying to Elizabeth, I am not just your spy of the realm, I am your occult spy. Because he was the man who did check her astrological charts and all those other things that are important to the occult. So it would make complete sense to use the numbers given by, Richard Deacon, to Dr. John Dee. It would make complete sense for Ian Fleming to do that, because if he has made James Bond into an occult figure, which, from what I can gather, he did. Interestingly, I went on holiday in England as I was writing this book to a place called St Margaret's Bay in England. No idea whatsoever that this was the home of, or had been the home of Ian Fleming. It was a complete coincidence, if such things occur. So, maybe one of young synchronicities, who knows?
Yeah, indeed.
But what was fascinating was that I was walking along the beach after I discovered that this was Ian Fleming's home, and just because I'd seen a picture of Noel Coward in a local restaurant, and I started asking questions. I was walking along the beach, and there were three houses, and I was pondering which house was Ian Fleming's. And then a man came out the back, an elderly gentleman, walking his little dogs. And I thought, well, go and ask him. And I said, do you know which one Ian Fleming lived in? And he said, yes, old boy, mine. And, it's incredible. And so we got talking, and I asked him about the 007. And because the local folklore was that 007 was taken from the local bus service, the number of the local bus. And it may have been spread by Ian Fleming himself as well in the local area, because, as we've said, he often gave many different reasons. And the elderly gentleman said, pish posh, basically. There's no way, old boy, that was the case. The buses around here have never been called 007. There's a much deeper reason for it, And this elderly gentleman confirmed quite a lot for me, that strange things occurred at this place that the locals would call, strange rituals and what have you, and which may indeed be tantric rites and various other things.
And what do you think Q stands for, Phil?
Oh, I have no idea. You tell me.
Just maybe quail? I don't know.
It may
the
be.
closest
Well,
thing I can think of.
Obviously, at the time that Ian Fleming was writing this, we'd just discovered the Gnostic Gospels, the Nag Hammadi texts, and of which, the Quell, of course, being the Q document, was one of them. Who knows why he did that? Other things that were being discovered at that time, of course, were amazing mathematical equations for ratios for how the universe itself is held together, and Q is one of those. But who knows? There's no evidence that I can find that gives it from the horse's mouth. But Ian Fleming was famous for not giving anything from the horse's mouth, the little bugger. But also, what's really interesting in the mathematical equation side is that Q, interestingly, goes along with another ratio or number, a specific number, which binds or bonds the universe together. And that's really, really interesting. Only for the fact, for me, I think if something works on every level, there's some truth to it. And that number, amazingly, which bonds atoms together, is 0.007. If it was 0.008, the universe would fly apart. And if it was 0.006, everything would crunch up into one ball, and we'd all be back together again in one point.
Wow.
So it's an incredible number to have, and these are the numbers that were being discovered at the very time that Ian Fleming was writing his Bond novels.
And lastly, Phil, and of course you probably might have known I would ask you this, what is your favorite James Bond actor, and what's your favorite James Bond movie so far?
Oh, no.
Did you like Casino Royale, at least?
You have so disappointed me, Miguel. I expected, 100% intellectual discussion here, and we get the standard DJ question. No, seriously, of course. My favourite Bond actor, I'm afraid to say, for Mr. Daniel Craig, was Pierce Brosnan.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes, I liked him because, one, I think he's a damn good actor. He plays it suave and sophisticated, and he plays it for me more in what I see as Bond. Daniel Craig is playing it, and it's not just him, of course, the directors are telling him to do this, etc. He's playing it in the rough and rugged, modern die-hard fashion. But I prefer Pierce Brosnan myself, and probably Die Another Day. I really like that one.
Well, that was our DJ moment for today. But that's all the time we have, and I'd really like to thank you for taking your time and discussing the Bond Code.
Thank you very much once again for having me on. I'm honored and in humility.
Oh, I'm the one who's honored, and you have yourself a good day, and good luck with the book.
You too, my friend.
Take care. And there you have it, my beloved Truth Seekers. Phil Gardiner giving us the anorexia on his new book, The Bond Code, and making the case that Ian Fleming was deep in his knees in all matters occult, including Gnosticism. A Calvinistic and Manichaean James Bond? Who would have thunk it? I guess that's a formula to getting all the hot girls while smirking when you kill a bad guy. Stranger things than all of this have happened, and sadly few of it is fiction. Again, it's the Bond Code, and Phil's address is gardinersworld.com. He's a man always with his ear against the ground for more of those truths that lie hidden behind the walls of common sense and marketing acceptance. In fact, Phil told me once that the key to marketing is fear. Bring this fear that without something you're nothing, and you've got a customer for life. Whether it's a church parishioner or the dork waiting in line for hours for the iPhone, it's all the same. They start stealing your individuality in school, priming you to be another zombie in the world of the spiritual undead. And the marketers, like the archons of the Gnostics, are just as blind as ignorant as the ones buying weeds or giving money in parishes against homosexuals. Life was meant to be a party, but we skipped over to the hangover. There's a beautiful line in the Nag Hammadi Library's Allogenes that points to where we need to be or where we'd like to be. Here it be. I withdrew from the world to search deeper into myself, and the moment I came to know myself, I was filled with revelation. In a state of blessedness, I merged with myself. Yes, I came to stand and rest in the silence and stillness. Through an unknowing knowledge, I came to know the one who exists in me, the one who is unknowable, the one who, himself, eternally stands at rest in silence and stillness. Could have come out of Buddhism or Taoism, but it's the Western version of this thing called Gnosticism. easier to understand for us in this side of the globe because of its Judeo-Christian trappings. And before we go, please remember that I'm always available to you, my beloved truth seekers. How to find me is at our homepage, thegodabovegod.com. If you have any questions, articles or poems you might like to put up, if I find them Gnostic enough, or just a plethora of curses, let me know. I can't promise to get to all of them because of the health problems I have. Once upon a time, Jehovah trampled on me with his metaphysical Doc Martens. But we are all part of a pantheon that seeks to be joined in a place higher than the gods and their egos, called the Pleroma. We are the Gnostics. Divided we stand, together we rise. I am, and I am Abraxas. The road is ended, the song is over. Thought I'd have something more to say. But don't cultivate any troubles, my beloved truth seekers, because like heaven above you, the spy that loved you, I'm keeping all of your secrets safe with me tonight. Hello and goodbye as always.